chat group as is that working? Yeah. Okay, I've posted a link on the chat group for those who want the handout. I didn't manage to download it earlier. This shiur is in a nishmas, Moras Shayna, HaChover R Aryeh, who is my great-grandmother and whose Yahrzeit is tonight. I want to look at is obviously the one of the central pieces of this week's Parsha is the 10 Commandments. And specifically, I wanted to look with a little bit of eon, a little bit of depth into the first of the 10 Commandments, the famous Mitzva of Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher Tzisicha Meretz Mitzrayim Beis Avodim, who took you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of servitude, out of the house of bondage. Now, when we think about the Aseret HaDibros, we translate this phrase as 10 Commandments. The Aseret HaDibros, the 10 Commandments. Of course, we say that. We refer to Aseret HaDvarim, the 10 statements. These are Dibros, the 10 statements. Do you know why this? Okay. Goodness. Okay, so I'm going to start again from where we left off. I apologise to everyone for the problem. Hopefully, my mobile phone will now deal with it. Okay, so goodness. So forgive me for those who are here who did hear me. Also, a little revision. So we were looking at the central psukim of this week's Sedra, the Aseret HaDibros, and I wanted to focus on the first of the 10 commandments. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Asher Tzisicha Meretz Mitzrayim Beis Avodim. Now, even though we refer to these colloquially as the 10 commandments, in Lashon HaKodesh these are referred to as Aseret HaDvarim. Where was the pasuk you were looking at this? In Vaischanan they refer to as Aseret HaDvarim. In Daled and Yud Gimel it's referred to as Aseret HaDvarim. We refer to them as Aseret HaDibros, but of course the literal translation.
I think it's in Akev. It's in Akev actually, yeah.
In Akev. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ian.
Akev, yeah.
It's in Akev, but also
it's around about Revere, I think.
Okay, thank you. So these are referred to as Aseret. Ian, do you know what the grammar is? Why have we switched to Aseret HaDibros rather than Aseret HaDvarim? Is there anywhere in the Torah where it's referred to as Dibros? I'm not sure either.
Well,
okay.
Maybe Devarim and Dibros don't mean exactly the same thing. I mean, Devarim are words, and maybe Dibros are sayings. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly it means the same thing. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll leave that as a bit of homework for our grammarians, both those online and live here in Shul. Either way, the Torah doesn't refer to these as 10 commandments. That's a fact. These are 10 words or 10 statements. And in fact, the division of the Aseret HaDibros into 10 commandments isn't at all clear-cut. As I mentioned before the recording froze, it's not obvious how to divide these into 10 parts. For example, Isachmod could be split up into several commandments. Don't be jealous of the possessions of one's fellow. Don't be jealous of the house of one's fellow. Don't be jealous of the spouse of one's fellow. So there are, one could split in different forms various of the commandments. Now, the Rambam in his Sefer Mitzvos, which we'll look at in a few moments, is the figure that argues that Anochi Hashem Elokecha should be viewed as a commandment. And the background to this is the Gemara in Makos. Gemara Makos tells us, and we'll see this quoted by the Rambam shortly, that there are 613 commandments, 613 mitzvahs in the Torah, Taryag mitzvahs. Unfortunately, however, Chazal do not tell us what these 613 commandments are, and the calculation or the division of how these 613 commandments are worked out was a project that the Gaonim and the Rishonim embarked upon. Now, one may think this is very simple. Count the instructions in the Torah, and surely you will come to 613. But it's not that simple. It is true that if one counts the instructions in the Torah, it's somewhere in the ballpark of 600 to 700 instructions, but the devil is in the detail. So, for example, what happens when one mitzvah is repeated several times? Does this count as one count out of the 613, or does it count as several counts in the 613? What happens when a mitzvah has several parts to it? So tzitzis have the white threads of the tzitzis and the tcheles of the tzitzis. Is this one mitzvah, two mitzvahs? Tefillin, that's just tefillin shel rosh, tefillin shel yad. Is this one mitzvah or two mitzvahs? Arba minim. Have four species, or these several mitzvahs, or these one mitzvahs? All these matters need clarification. Then we have a whole string of commandments, which were one-off commandments. We're now approaching, in this week's Sedra, for example, there's the mitzvah not to ascend Har Sinai. This was a mitzvah one-off in Jewish history. It's not an eternal mitzvah that applies for all generations. Is this one of the 613 mitzvahs or not? Then next week's Sedra and onwards, we have a series of mitzvahs about the building of the Mishkan. Again, should these mitzvahs be counted? They applied as one-off events in Jewish history. These were not permanent mitzvahs throughout Jewish history. So the concept of 613 commandments found in Chazal, the specifics of the 613 commandments, not laid out clearly at all and debated amongst the Rishonim. One of the Rishonim that embarked on this project of listing the 613 principal mitzvahs is the Rambam. He did this at a relatively early stage in his career as a preparation for his great halachic work, the Mishnah Torah. And he wrote his Sefer Mitzvahs, his Book of Commandments in Arabic, listing the 613 commandments. And before that, he has 14 principles that he uses to work out what these 613 commandments are. And he discusses how to deal with mitzvahs in several parts, like tefillin or tzitzis, discusses how to deal with one-off mitzvahs, like don't ascend Har Sinai at the time of the giving of the Torah. He lays out what he considers to be the rules and principles, and then he lists the 613 commandments. Now, the very first mitzvah he lists is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. The Rambam does not list the 613 commandments in the order in which they are given. If you look in the Chumash and go in order of mitzvahs, then there are mitzvahs that precede Anochi Hashem Elokecha. For example, the first mitzvah given to Adam and Chava, Puru Revu, be fruitful and multiply. The commandment to Yaakov not to eat the Git HaNosher. In last week's, in 2 weeks ago, the mitzvah of the Jewish calendar, but the Rambam starts off, lists the mitzvahs rather, not in the chronological order in which they were given, but in the order that makes sense to him in terms of the fundamentals. He builds it as a structure. So he starts off from the grounds with what are the most fundamental, and then builds up to a whole system of how he understands mitzvahs should be arranged, and then he follows that system thematically in his halachic work, the Mishnah Torah. So the Mishnah Torah is a thematic halachic work in which all the mitzvahs of Shabbos and Yom Tov are arranged together, all the mitzvahs of Korbanos are arranged together, and the first section of the Mishnah Torah is called the Yesodei HaTorah, the foundations of the Torah, in which he speaks about what he considers to be foundational to Torah, which, in his view, are the mitzvahs around belief and the mitzvahs around character development and the like. So the first mitzvah that the Rambam lists in the 613 mitzvahs is Anochi Hashem Elokecha. However, in what way is Anochi Hashem Elokecha a mitzvah? It's a statement. I am the Lord your God. If you actually read the 10 commandments neutrally, it doesn't appear to be a commandment at all. It appears to be an introduction to everything else. So first of all, Hashem introduces himself, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God, and then he says the remaining 9 mitzvahs that follow it. It doesn't appear to be a mitzvah at all. What comes after Anochi Hashem Elokecha? Well, the first commandment, do not have other gods, don't worship pagan idols. Anochi Hashem Elokecha doesn't appear to be a mitzvah at all. The Rambam, though, understands it is a mitzvah. And let's have a look inside at this first source. On the source sheet, I put the link on the chat. Mitzvahs asay achas, the first positive commandment. He had tziva is the commandment asher tzivanu, with which we were commanded, the ha'emonas ha'elefus, to believe in God's existence, to believe that there is a first or original cause, the source of existence who brings all creations into beings. So the Rambam believes and lists Anochi Hashem Elokecha as the first of the 10 commandments. The Rambam wasn't forced to do that. It could have been that this wouldn't be a mitzvah, and these would be 10 statements, but not 10 mitzvahs, not 10 commandments. However, the Rambam believes that even this first statement is a commandment. So We refer to these as 10 commandments. The Pasuk calls them 10 statements. We could have understood the first statement, Anochi, is not a mitzvah. The Rambam believes it is a mitzvah. What's the mitzvah? Belief in Hashem. The Rambam is aware that this is somewhat of a chiddush. This is not obvious at all. And to prove his point, he quotes a Gemara in Makkas. The Gemara in Makkas that tells us there are 613 commandments. And because we ran a little short of time, I don't want to run out of time because there are technological problems, I'm just going to summarize the next bit of the Rambam outside. And the Rambam says as follows. The Gemara in Makkas says, where do we get from? What is a hint or an allusion to the idea of 613 commandments? Because the Pasuk says, Torah Sivalonu Moshe. Pasuk in Sefer Devarim, Torah Sivalonu Moshe. Moshe commanded us the Torah. The gematria of Torah is 611. i.e. Moshe commanded us 611 mitzvahs, but 2 mitzvahs we heard directly from Hashem, Anochi and Loyeh. The positive mitzvah of Anochi, I am the Lord your God, believe in me, and the negative mitzvah of Loyeh, don't have and don't worship idols. So says the Rambam, since the very source of 613 commandments is 611 commanded by Moshe, Torah Sivalanu Moshe, plus 2 commanded directly by God, by Hashem, to the whole of Jewish people, as per the Gemara in Makkas, you see that these 2 instructions, Anochi and Loyeh, count as 2 mitzvahs. So evidently the Gemara is of the belief that Anochi is a positive mitzvah to believe in Hashem. This is the maths of the Rambam's proof. So let's just pause for a few moments and understand what's going on over here. There is a grammatical inconsistency in the Yahrzeit HaDibros. When you read the Yahrzeit HaDibros, the 8 last commandments refer to Hashem in the 3rd person. Hashem is He. The first 2 commandments, Hashem refers to Himself as I. Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am Hashem your God. Don't have other gods, don't worship other gods in my presence. So Hashem refers to Himself in the 1st person. The commandments continue. Now Hashem is referred to in the 3rd person. God made the world in 6 days. God took us out of Egypt, and that's why we should keep Shabbos. So Hashem is now referred to in the 3rd person. So the Gemara picks up on this, and as we know, Rashi quotes this very famous medrash. It says that the first 2 of the 10 commandments, the first 2 mitzvahs, were spoken directly by Hashem to the Jewish people. The Jewish people couldn't cope with the prophetic experience. It was overwhelming, and therefore the remaining 8 were delivered via Moshe, and the rest of the Torah was delivered via Moshe. Therefore 611 commandments, Torah, the gematria of Torah, 611 Sivalonu Moshe, commanded by Moshe, and 2 were commanded directly by Hashem. So the Gemara in Makkas is a nice remez, a nice clue to this idea, or hint to this idea of 613 commandments. The Rambam says what we see in it is that Anochi Hashem Elokecha is a mitzvah. Okay, so the view of the Rambam is that Anochi Hashem Elokecha is a mitzvah to believe in Hashem. There are, however, several difficulties with this stance of the Rambam, that the first of the 10 commandments is a commandment, a mitzvah, to believe in Hashem. The first difficulty is what we've already mentioned, textual. It doesn't read like a commandment. It just seems to say, I am Hashem your God. It doesn't say, believe I am Hashem your God. It seems like an introduction. Hashem just says, this is me, I am Hashem your God. Now, it may be that the Rambam understood it's a statement. Here I am, you have to know I exist. The second problem on the Rambam is, can one command belief at all? Is belief the sort of thing that can be commanded? Not so clear-cut. Actions, the majority of mitzvahs in the Torah are actions, things to do. So that we understand we can command actions. Emotions, a bit more difficult to understand the commanding of emotions. Maybe another year we'll speak about this. Sachmo, don't be jealous, love your fellow as yourself, mitzvahs of emotions, but the Torah does command mitzvahs. The Torah also commands speech, certain halachos about speech. There are things we should say, things we shouldn't say. But can one command belief? I mean, either you believe or you don't believe. What does it mean to command belief? So this is a second conceptual question on the Rambam. Third question on the Rambam is a question of logic, which there seems to be something circular over here. If you believe, you believe. So there's no need to command it. And if you don't believe, then who is it doing the commanding? So it doesn't make sense to say there's a mitzvah in which Hashem commands, believe in me. If you believe there is a Hashem there commanding you to believe in him, then you believe in God. And if you don't believe in God, then there's no one that you are being commanded to, no one there commanding you to believe. So 3 questions. It doesn't read like a commandment. It's not obvious that one can command belief. And there's a circularity about commanding belief, because if you believe, you believe. If you don't believe, then there's no one there to command you to believe. So I'm going to try and use the time available to present 3 answers to this question. And the answers will unpick the statement. So the statement is, there's a mitzvah to believe in Hashem. We're going to unpick the word mitzvah, we're going to unpick the word believe, and we're going to unpick the word Hashem. And each one of those 3 words, if we unpick successfully, will provide an answer. So hopefully we'll come up with 3 ways of answering the view of the Rambam that understands that Hanot Hashem Rekecha is a mitzvah to believe in Hashem by analysing each of these 3 words. So that's our program for tonight. So the first answer to the question is one that is in line with the view of the Rambam. And we need to ask what it means to believe in Hashem. Now, the Hebrew word used in this Sefer Mitzvahs is Huhatzivoi. If we look again at our text in our text, Huhatzivoi behemonach Elohus, belief in God. The Rambam in his Mishnah Torah doesn't use the word emunah, belief, but uses the word yediyah, knowledge. Now, we should be aware that the text of Sefer Mitzvahs is a translated text. As I mentioned, the Rambam wrote his Sefer Mitzvahs in Arabic, and whenever you're using a translation, nuance can get lost. That's a fundamental problem with translation. So when the Rambam says there's a mitzvah to believe in Hashem, it is not entirely clear if this is indeed the view of the Rambam. The Rambam in his Mishnah Torah says there's a mitzvah to know that there is a God. If you turn to the top of page 2, halacha 6, it says, V'yedias dovazeh mitzvahs aseh. The knowledge of this is a positive commandment. Shenema anochi Hashem, as it says, I am Hashem, your God. So this is a quote from Mishnah Torah. In a few moments, we will look in more detail at this quote from Mishnah Torah. That in the Hebrew book that we have of the Rambam doesn't talk about emunah, he talks about yediyah, knowledge as opposed to belief. Now, this already is therefore a very different matter, because whilst it is difficult to understand what it means to command belief, it is a little easier to understand what it means to command knowledge, because knowledge can be researched and investigated, and we understand the process. And indeed, we know this was the view of the Rambam. The Rambam in his Mishnah Torah, the Rambam in his Moreh Nevuchim, his Guide to the Perplexed, argued that it isn't sufficient just to believe based on nothing, or tradition even, perhaps. The Rambam believes there has to be a basis to one's belief. The Rambam understood that everyone has to have at least some ability to philosophically contemplate and arrive at not just a belief of God, but a knowledge of Hashem. More than that, and this is perhaps increasingly well known, the word emunah itself isn't necessarily accurately translated as belief. Emunah may more accurately mean conviction. In fact, emunah may be a stronger word than yediyah. If yediyah means knowledge, emunah may mean convinced knowledge, conviction, certainty of knowledge, firmly held belief. The history of this mistranslation is that the word emunah or omein or the like probably was, it originally meant firmly implanted. So for example, there's Yahrzeit Ne'eman, a firmly implanted peg. So omein there means something which is firmly implanted. Now in Old English and the King James translation, this was translated as faith or faithful, because faith meant a firm, if something is faithful, it means it's firm and committed. So the understanding of this word emunah meant a firm commitment. As English evolved, faith came to mean a belief of sorts, ungrounded faith. You often hear people saying, if it has a rationale, if it's rational, if there's a basis to your belief, then it's not belief, it's not faith, it's knowledge. And discussions around faith in faiths and religion. So it may well be that this is the source of the English language confusion, but in classic Hebrew, it may well be that the correct translation is a firmly held conviction, in which case, if the Mishnah Torah, if the Sefer Mitzvah's translation in Arabic is correct, the Rambam is consistent with what he says elsewhere. And when he says there's a mitzvah to be ma'amin in Hashem, he doesn't just mean there's a mitzvah to believe in Hashem without basis, he means there's a mitzvah to have a firmly held belief. Now, if this is correct in the Rambam, then we understand how the Rambam understands this to be a mitzvah. Because the truth is in life, we sometimes start off life with a belief of sorts. We go through life, times in our lives when our belief is stronger, perhaps times in our life when our belief is weaker. The Rambam believed that we have an obligation to embark on a journey of movement from perhaps a childish belief to a knowledge, and from an unsophisticated knowledge to a more grounded knowledge, and eventually to a conviction grounded on principles of careful and rational thought. So Rambam believes there's a journey to embark on. The Rambam is aware that we don't start off life as philosophers. Little children perhaps have a more basic belief. But he believed that we have a journey, an obligation to journey and pursue knowledge of Hashem, not merely belief in HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and certainly not a wobbly and unfaithful or unconvinced belief. So with this, we have answered our questions on the Rambam. We asked, how is it possible to command belief? And we asked, surely there's something circular about saying that Hashem has commanded, believe in me, because if you believe there's a commander, Hashem, who's instructing belief, then you will believe that, then you believe in him. So what's more being commanded? And the answer is, this is addressed to every single one of us who has some level of belief, hopefully. We know, we intuit, we have a relationship with Hashem. We believe there's a God commanding us on Hashem Lekecha. But the Mitzvah says, don't stop there, don't leave it as that. Now firmly pursue your emunah and ground it in a basis and make it convinced and with conviction and strong and a yediyah. And this is the Mitzvah, the journey that we're called upon to embark on. So this is a first answer to the Rambam. There's a mitzvah to believe in Hashem. We've unpicked the word belief. The Rambam is of the view that this is knowledge. The Rambam is of the view that there's a lot of work to be done till we arrive at this knowledge, and therefore this is a mitzvah to engage in that self-work till we arrive in knowledge of Hashem. Such work and such a philosophical quest can be commanded, and such work and such a labour of arriving at belief, it avoids the circularity problem, because it's addressed to someone who does have a belief in Hashem, but now wishes to move from mere belief to yediyah, to knowledge, which is what this mitzvah is about. So this is one answer to the question. A second answer to the question comes from reading the Rambam in his Mishnah Torah. And I'd like to read the Mishnah Torah, for us to read the Mishnah Torah together. And this is at the bottom of page 1. And the Rambam says as follows: foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdom. Leda is to know, that there is a first being, who brought into being all existence, and everything that exists only came into existence through the truth of his being. So here the Rambam says that Hashem is the first being, and he is the cause of all existence. In Halacha Hey, the Rambam, so we now turn to page 2. The Rambam, this is, I've cut and pasted them. This is Halacha Aleph. Halacha Beis Gimel Daled, the next 3 halachas, the Rambam elaborates on this belief. In Halacha 5, the Rambam says, this entity, Hamotzei Hazeh, Hu Eloka Ha'olam, is the God of the world, Adon Kol Ha'aretz, the Lord of the entire earth. He controls the sphere with infinite and unbounded power, power that continues without interruption. So what the Rambam here is saying is that this first being, who is also the cause of everything, is also the one who runs the world. He is the one, in the language of the Rambam, who controls the sphere. The sphere is the astronomical system that the Rambam believes in based on the science of his time, that the planets and the stars revolve around the Earth through a system of spheres. We don't need to go into that for our purposes now. All the Rambam is saying in modern parlance is that this God who brought the world into existence and is the cause of all existence, is also the one who runs the world and causes everything to happen the way it does. Now, why would the Rambam separate between these two things? The Rambam has a two-tiered structure over here. He says you should know that there is a first cause, a first being who brings everything into existence, point number one. And point number two, this first being, this first cause, is the one that runs everything. And the reason the Rambam says this is because there were at least two schools of thought that distinguished between these two roles. In modern philosophy, this is known as deism. People that believe in a deity, in a god, who brought the universe into existence, but they believe now God has left the universe to run itself. The Greeks, for whom the Rambam had a lot of time and a lot of respect, but not unlimited respect, many of them believed that. And Plato and Plato were monotheists in the sense that they were deists. They believed in a first cause and a creator, though the one quite different to our Jewish characterization of him. Even according to the Rambam, who adopted much of their thinking. But they also were of the view that this God didn't interact with his creation in any way at all. Then we have another group of thinkers or believers who adopt a similar stance, and these are the pagans. Many pagans believe in a one first cause, a ultimate being of supreme power that brings the world into existence, but then they believe that God has outsourced the running of the world to the numerous little gods that run everything that goes on. The Rambam elaborates on this in his Hilchos Avodah Zarah. In his Laws of Avodah Zarah, Rambam gives a history of the world in which he argues that all pagans initially started off as believers in Hashem, but they thought that it was appropriate to serve his creatures and ultimately came to believe that these creatures had power. There's been a lot of discussion about this recently, even in terms of what's perhaps the most visible pagan belief that's still prevalent in the world, which is Hinduism. So a large part of the world has moved towards monotheism, Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and so on. Hinduism is probably the largest pagan faith that's still around, and certainly I don't know much about the faith, obviously, but certainly from my reading, that the most sophisticated ends of Hindu theology believes in a monotheistic creator behind everything, but it believes that this creator manifests itself into multiple deities, and hence the pagan and idol worshipping elements of it. There's traces of this even in Christianity, of course, which on the one hand claims to be a monotheist faith, on the other hand it believes in some form of divided gods or with different elements and persons to his being, including a god that manifests as a human being. So there's elements there of this sort of pagan combination in which there's belief in an ultimate first cause God, but this God isn't fully running the world. So the Rambam over here separates between these two beliefs, and he says there is a first cause, a being that brought everything into existence. So far, Greeks, you'll agree with me. Pagans, some of you might agree with me, but you should know this first cause is in control and is running everything that goes on, and this is where Judaism comes in. We believe that this is a God who has a relationship with us. In the Yud Gimel Ikrim, in the 13 principles of faith, again, the Rambam elaborates on this. If you look in the division between the 13 principles of faith, some of them about God, but some of them about our ability to interact with God. This God communicates with us. He has prophets, schar v'onesh, reward and punishment, prophecy, including the Torah itself, which is the peak of prophecy. We can daven, and it is appropriate to daven and worship this God because he is accessible to us. We shouldn't think the only way to worship him is through pagan entities. So this is very, very central to the sort of understanding of Judaism. However, there's another or second reason why the Rambam splits these two. Let's look at halacha 6, halacha above in the Rambam. V'yedias davar zeh, and knowledge of this matter, mitzvah sasei, is the mitzvah sasei, shenema anoich Hashem elokecha, as it says, I am the Lord your God. So here it's fascinating. For the first 4 halachas of the Rambam, he didn't mention anything about mitzvahs. He said this is the foundation of all foundations and the pillar of all wisdom, to know that there is a first cause, a first being who brought everything into existence. Then he says this first being controls and runs the world, and the knowledge of that fact is a mitzvah. What is the mitzvah? Onochi Hashem elokecha. Let's translate with care Onochi Hashem elokecha. Onochi Hashem. I am Hashem. Yud Kei Vav Kei. Yud Kei Vav Kei refers to degree possible to God's absolute existence. In fact, the meaning of the word Yud-Kei Vav-Kei might mean something like absolute existence and the source of all existence. We don't know exactly what the word means, but it seems etymologically linked to the root word hoya, to be, beingness. Hoya, hoiver v'yeh, we say about Hashem. He was, is, and will be. So Yud-Kei Vav-Kei seems a combination of these words. It means absolute existence. Anochi Hashem, Anochi Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, I am absolute existence. We can't say the words, we can't even say that name, because absolute infinite existence is beyond our awareness. It's transcendence. It's infinite. It's indescribable. We can't even give name ultimately to this God. The Rambam elaborates on this in Mona V'Chim, that when we wish to speak about God himself, we can't say anything about him. We can only say what he isn't, because he's unbounded and limitless and infinite. Anochi Hashem, I am Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, who is Elokecha, who is the Elokim, who Elokim, the judge, the power. Elokim is a word not just used for gods, it's used Elohim for idolatrous belief, it's used for judges, it's used for other powerful beings. Anochi Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, I am absolute existence, the cause of all existence. I, the first cause, am Elokecha. I'm the one who runs things, who's in control, who's the judge of all life, who's the master of the universe, who runs everything. We understand the continuation of the pasuk. He took you out from the land of Egypt. You saw me running things. I brought the plagues. I took you out of Egypt. You see that I am in control. So what is the mitzvah according to the Rambam in Mishnah Torah? Not the belief in the first cause. That is the reality. That's the background. That's the context. The mitzvah is to believe that this first cause is the being who is running and controlling everything, as opposed to the idolatrous belief, which is maybe there is a God, a deity that brought everything into existence, but now it's appropriate for us to serve the beings that he created, the sun god, the moon gods, and the various powers that exist. So in this reading of the Rambam, we have arrived at a second answer to our question. We asked the question, who is it who's giving the command, and what is the commandment to believe? The answer is in this reading, when we say the mitzvah is to believe in Hashem, the more accurate version should be, the mitzvah is to believe that Hashem is Elokim, Hashem Gu Elokim, as we say on Yom Kippur, and as the Navi said when he came to fight the idolatry of Baal. He was speaking to the Jewish people who knew there was a God, but they wished to worship the idols of Baal. He said, no, you're making a mistake. Hashem, Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, Hu Elokim. The only power that exists is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. So the mitzvah is, believe that Anochi Hashem, I am Elokecha, I am your God. I'm the one who's running things, and I am in complete control. Don't fall for Avodah Zorah, for the pagan claim that Hashem isn't running things. So the first belief, the belief in Hashem himself, to the Rambam, that's not a mitzvah. That's reason, that's logic. You can't think, you can't understand existence unless one understands there is a cause behind existence. Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, the first cause of all existence. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is now that you have a rational mindset, now that you have the pillars of necessary belief, which is that there is a first cause that brought everything in existence, now know and believe that Elokecha, that I am running everything, and therefore we have resolved the paradox of how Hashem can introduce himself, Anochi Hashem, and yet commands belief, because this commandment is addressed to the believer who believes in Yud-Kei Vav-Kei. He believes there is a God, but he is uncertain about Hashem running things. To that the mitzvah is given, Elokecha, it is I who am in control. So the first answer we gave to the question was, there's a mitzvah to believe in Hashem. We said we misunderstood the word belief. Belief isn't a on-off digital static yes, no, black-white status where it doesn't make sense to command it, where if you believe, then you believe, if you don't believe, you don't believe. It's a journey, there's stages, there's faith, there's yediyah, there's knowledge, there's a progression. This is the mitzvah to believe. The second answer we've given is to believe in God. What do we mean there's a mitzvah to believe in God? The belief in Yud-Kei Vav-Kei, in Hashem's absolute existence in the first cause, that was never a matter of debate that the Rambam brought at the beginning of Mishnah Torah. He doesn't even say it's a mitzvah. He says it's Yisodus, it's a philosophical given, it's an axiomatic almost. What is the mitzvah of belief in Hashem? The mitzvah is Elokecha, to believe in that this God is running things. And for those, by the way, who are interested in exploring more this this division. I have an essay which has just been published in a new book that's come out called Spinoza, Strauss, and Judaism, and I was asked to write an essay for it in which I spoke about this distinction of the Rambam and the Rambam's understanding that belief in Yud Kei is axiomatic as opposed to the Mitzvah, as opposed to the next stage, which is a Mitzvah. I'm happy to share the book or the essay with anyone who's interested in pursuing this further. The Rambam, by the way, makes this explicit in a continuation of Halacha Vav, because the Rambam says this isn't only a positive mitzvah, but this is also a negative commandment. Believe that I, God, who is the first cause, am running everything. That's the mitzvah of Anochi. Don't believe in idolatrous views that the idols and the sun and the moon and created beings are running things. That's the mitzvah, the second of the Ten Commandments, of the continuation that says that you shouldn't have pain relief. Look at the Rambam in the second half of Halacha 6, the second half of Halacha Vav. Whoever believes there is another God besides Hashem transgresses the negative commandments, as it says, you shall have no other gods before me. So here the Rambam is telling us clearly, as he explains in his understanding of Avodah Zarah, idolatrous belief is not a denial of God as the first cause and the creator who brings everything into existence. Is the denial that Hashem is running things and the belief that nature runs itself, or nature and the forces of nature are godly beings who run the world. And this is the mitzvah to believe that it is Hashem who is running everything. So this is our second answer to a question. It is a mitzvah to believe in Hashem, but more precisely, it's a mitzvah to believe in Anochi Hashem Elokecha. And it's a beautiful pshat. The Rambam has given us a beautiful reading in the Parsha. Anochi Hashem, I am Yud Kei Vav Kei Elokecha. The mitzvah is to know that I am your God, Asher Tziticha Me'eretz Mitzrayim. A third answer to the Rambam is to understand what we mean by mitzvah. Now, to understand this next point, I want us to carry on reading the Rambam. The Rambam says, Elo kazeh echad hu. This God is one. This is Halacha 7. Einoi lo shnaim v'lo yesal, shnaim ala echad. He is not two or more than two, but he is one. She'ein b'yichudoi echad min achadim and nitzayim b'olam. And there's no unity that surpasses his unity in the world. So what the Rambam so far said is that God is one, and he is the most one thing that exists. Let me explain what I mean by that. It is true to say, for example, that here where I'm sitting, this is one table. However, it isn't a complete unity in two ways. It's true that I'm sitting next to one table, so I could say there's one God and there's one table in front of me, but this table is one of many tables. So it's one in the sense that this table is but one, but it links to many in the sense that there are many tables. Similarly, the table itself has an aspect of non-oneness, of plurality to it, because it has a top and it has four legs and it's made up of parts. So there's a multiplicity to the table. So even though I can point to this table and say it is one, it has aspects of more than one, of multiplicity to it, because it's made up of parts and there's many such tables in existence. Even if I want to speak about an individual human, and I want to say Zobin is one, I am one, it is true I am one, there's only one of me, nonetheless I'm part of a set of human beings. So I have commonality with other beings, there's many other human beings. More broadly, you could also say I'm a living creature, and there's yet more living creatures. And finally, I'm made up of parts, I have my arms and my legs and all the various parts of which are made up. And therefore, again, I'm not one in the fullest sense of the word. So the Rambam is of the belief that when we say Hashem is one, we don't just mean he happens to be one, like this table happens to be one, or Zobin happens to be one. We mean he is one in every sense of the word. There's no other gods, there's no other beings like him. He is incomparable to anything else. He isn't made up of parts, and so on and so forth. So this is the first part of the Rambam says. He says God is one, he isn't two, and more than that, his unity is more unified than anything else. Then he carries on and he says, if there were many gods, his power would be limited. It's only possible that there is one. And knowledge of this is a positive commandment. So the Rambam translates the pasuk Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad to be a mitzvah. Shema Yisrael, listen Israel, know Israel, that Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, that Hashem is one. So what the Rambam said is there is a mitzvah to believe that he is one. But he's also thrown in a quick piece of reasoning. And he says, if the last commandment of Anochi Hashem Elokecha taught me to believe that Hashem is all-powerful, inherent in all-powerful is that there can only be one. Because if there's two, neither of them can be all-powerful because they're sharing the power. At a minimum, one of them doesn't have control over the other. So you can't have a multiplicity of gods. God must be one, otherwise he wouldn't be all-powerful. The Rambam, the truth is, means more profound philosophical truth than that. He believes that if God had parts, he wouldn't be all-powerful because he would be limited. I'm not going to go into the full philosophy of the Rambam, but the Rambam claims that inherent in the idea that Hashem is all-powerful is that he is one. Now here we need to pause for a moment, because the first of the positive commandments the Rambam told us was know that this Hashem who created the world is the one who's running the world and is all-powerful. He brought the whole universe into existence and runs and is all-powerful in running the universe. The second of the 10, I'm going to have to borrow your phone. My phone battery is dying, unfortunately. Forgive me those who are online. I'm about to get cut off, and I'm going to just join on another one. I apologize. Okay. So apologies again for the technology, but hopefully we're getting there. So again, just to summarize what we said before we got interrupted by the technology, the Rambam argues that the first of the 10 commandments is to know that God, who brought everything into existence, runs the whole universe. The second of the 10 commandments is to know that this God is one. But he also says that inherent in the first of the commandments, that God runs the universe, is the idea that he's all-powerful, and therefore he must be one, because if there's two, neither of the two are all-powerful. Now this is very interesting. What this means to say is that the second of the mitzvahs is in a sense redundant, because if I understood fully the implications of belief in Hashem, I would know he's all-powerful, and therefore know there can be but one, there can't be two. Nonetheless, the Torah splits these into two mitzvahs: belief in Hashem and knowledge that he is one, not two. Now, in terms of commandments, if I believe in Hashem and know he is all-powerful, implicit in that is the knowledge that he is one, not two, because if he is two, he isn't, neither of them can possibly be all-powerful. Which means to say that the Rambam understands a mitzvah as not necessarily meaning a separate, discrete commandment, and it may be that what we mean by mitzvah is simply a truth, a relationship to Hashem, even if inherent in that isn't a separate instruction or action that I need to do. Let me just try and explain this reasoning again. In the first mitzvah is belief in Hashem, and that Hashem is all-powerful. Inherent in the Rambam, and that says the Rambam, if we think clearly, is that there is only one God, not two. Nonetheless, the second mitzvah is to know that there is one God, not two, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, because otherwise neither God would be all-powerful. But if I've really understood the first mitzvah, it's already commanded me, therefore, to know there's one. But I may not have been conscious of that, and I may not have thought it through to the end. I may not have understood that implication. And there's a second mitzvah to know that this God is one, not two. Which means to say that the Rambam is happy to list mitzvahs which reflect reality or connection to Hashem, even if they aren't adding extra commandments. And the truth is, when you look in the Sefer Mitzvahs, this is consistent with how the Rambam understands the 613 commandments. For example, the laws of monetary justice, he lists as mitzvahs. Next week's Mitzvah Hashem Mishpatim, we'll look at some of the laws of monetary justice. He lists these as mitzvahs. There's no action to do. The mitzvahs don't steal. What's yours is yours and what's mine is mine. But the mechanism and the reality of ownership, he also considers to be one of the Taryag mitzvahs. So we need to think through what we mean by a mitzvah in the Rambam. We translate a mitzvah as a commandment. I've mentioned before from the Kabbalists that they give an alternative translation to the word mitzvah. A mitzvah may be linked to the word sevet. Tzivoy, the meaning of the word tzivoy may mean a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a relationship to Hashem. There's 613 connections to Hashem. Etymologically similar to the modern Hebrew word sevet, a team or a link. the Rambam, who isn't a Kabbalist, nonetheless seems to have some sort of analogous view. Mitzvahs should be seen as roots of connection to spirituality, roots of connection to spiritual reality, whether these entail specific actions to take or not. Some mitzvahs involve specific actions that I need to embark on. Some mitzvahs reflect reality. For example, the laws of monetary dealings and finances, and how contracts are made, and how monetary transfers are affected, and penalties are to be paid, and the like. There's no specific action to take from these. These are just part of the fabric of how monetary system works in the thinking of the Torah. And finally, in the belief, in the world of belief, the Rambam may indeed adopt the stance that there isn't a specific action to take. This is merely outlining what we see as the reality of what it means to connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to transcendence. This is what the Rambam means when he lists something as a mitzvah. These are 613 routes to connection. In fact, the Rambam says this explicitly, not just in his Moed Nevuchim, but in his Mishnah Torah, in his halachic word, in which he calls mitzvahs eitzos, advice. And I've quoted this before in my philosophical shiur. The Rambam calls mitzvahs eitzos, advice. Very interesting, by the way. It's always interesting to see how different schools of thought in Judaism are not as far apart as they are often presented. Very interesting that the Zohar, representing the system of thinking of the Mekabalim, very foreign from the Rambam's thinking, but in this respect refers to mitzvahs in the same language as atzin, as advice. And the meaning of advice here doesn't mean that mitzvahs are optional. If I give you advice, it means you either keep them or you don't keep them. Obviously, the Rambam held that mitzvahs are absolutely compulsory. But what he's trying to say when he says advice is that they are roots, a means to get to something bigger. What's the something bigger? A connection to Hashem, a relationship to Hashem, as the Rambam outlines in his Moed Nevuchim, and as the Kabbalists in their own very different way understand. But both schools of thought agree that mitzvahs are not merely commandments where the sole purpose of the mitzvah is the obedience and the subjugation and the submission to Hashem, though this is an important element of the mitzvah, but the mitzvah is molding us and carving us into a certain sort of person. And therefore the Rambam seems to have accepted that in his list of Tariag mitzvahs of 613 mitzvahs can also be statements of fact, which are essential to us being the sort of people we are meant to be, even though there's no particular step or direction we need to take. And therefore he lists Anochi and Shema Yisrael as two separate mitzvahs, even though in a sense one is implicit in the other. So this is a third answer to our question. We asked, how can Hashem command belief? In this answer, the answer to the question is because a mitzvah doesn't necessarily always mean a commandment or a change you need to effect in yourself. It may be a description of what a spiritually appropriate being is. A spiritually appropriate being is one who is aligned to these 613 mitzvahs, some of which involve steps we can take, and others of which indeed involve this paradox, which is, if I don't believe, I don't believe. But if I'm not believing, then I'm not connecting to Hashem in the way that I need to. This would also explain why Anochi Hashem Elokecha isn't presented in the form of a commandment at all. And this was our opening question. Anochi Hashem Elokecha doesn't sound like a mitzvah, it sounds like a statement of fact. The Rambam may have been of the belief that indeed it is a statement of fact. Hashem is saying, here I am, this is me, you are now encountering me. Now that you've encountered me, this is the foundation of human spirituality. Therefore, this is the first of the 613 mitzvahs. It's not a commandment in the sense that there's something specific you can do. It is a premise or a foundation upon which everything else is built. But this foundation is one of the necessary steps of human spirituality, along with 612 later steps that follow in order to build us into the fullest people we can be. So to summarize this third answer, we asked, what does it mean to say there's a mitzvah to believe in Hashem? We unpicked the word belief, and we suggested that that could be a journey, according to the Rambam, a process one needs to go on. We unpicked Hashem, what we mean by Hashem in the thinking of the Rambam, and we said it may not be belief in Yud Kei Vav Kei, in the existence of Hashem, it may be belief in his running of the world. And finally, we need to unpick the statement mitzvah, and it may be that in the thinking of the Rambam, mitzvahs aren't just commandments, actions or emotions or speech that we need to do or say or feel. It might also be, in his own language, eitzos, formative and molding experiences that humans have to have. We need to be positioned for certain sorts of beings in order to have a meaningful spiritual life. Otherwise, we simply don't have that spiritual existence, and therefore Anochi is a mitzvah in the sense that it is a necessary way of being, even though there isn't a specific or defined step that the Rambam would say we have to take. And this is why it is phrased not as a commandment or an instruction, but as a statement. And even in the thinking of the Rambam, maybe the Rambam understands that mitzvahs don't just mean commandments, but also means ways of being. We've run out of time. I appreciate, unfortunately, that this is the show was a little cut short due to the technology, but I'll stop there for now. Maybe another time I'll be able to go through the final source at the bottom, page 2, from the Moan of Achim, which is a fascinating and important source. But for today, I'll stop there, and I apologize again about the internet connection, so I hope everyone managed to nonetheless follow that. So, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rabbi Zobin.
Thank you. I'm unable to see if anyone has posted anything on chat or asked any questions, because I can't see what's going on over here with this technology. So if anyone does want to ask anything, please feel free to do so. Otherwise, I'll stop here.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
How do you recognise the statement of commandment?
You don't. You need to understand which statements are formative and which ones aren't. Yeah, absolutely right. So in a sense, the Rambam would understand, since this is Hashem addressing us, so it's Hashem communicating something we need to know, but the need to know isn't a tzivah, it's not an instruction, believe in me, it's you need to know Anochi Hashem Elokecha. So if it's something we need to know, then it's not a commandment in the sense of instruction, but it qualifies as one of the Taryag mitzvahs because it's a way of being, it's a state of being. Don't forget, the Rambam struggled with this. He elaborated. He thought he needed to bring a proof from the Gemara and Makkas for the whole Gmacha in order to convince us that he's correct in claiming this is a mitzvah. So he's aware that there's a difficulty over here. Bereshis by Elohim is not a mitzvah because it's not a statement. Ultimately, the whole Torah is dictated by Hashem. There's not a statement expressed to the Jewish people as opposed to Anochi. That's how the Rambam would understand.
Could you not make a case for that Bereshis by Elohim also?
It seems the Rambam understands that belief in God as first cause is axiomatic, is necessary for all human reason. It's not. It precedes even the possibility of reason. He understands Elohim to be the running of the world as opposed to the bringing into existence of the world. Running of the world, belief. Existence, first cause. Possibility of human reason is predicated on that. Okay.